me. You're in my eye line. Excuse me. This is not not your show. I'm trying to do holiday cover, if you don't mind, about the Cybermen. A little bit better than you. You're going to be deleted, mate, I tell you. Whoa. Right. The Cybermen are communists, many say. Everything is equal. The Cybermen are problematic as they would have to represent diversity and inclusion issues of 2024. The Cybermen have been outgunned by Star Trek's The Borg. Can the Cybermen survive the Disneyfication or Russell T. Davies' whitewashing of classic Who? Cyber women? Cyber kids? After Davros having a Lourdes-like conversion with the ability to walk again. Can you believe it? And Sutek not being dead but snoozing on the TARDIS. What the hell is in store for the Cybermen? It is rich that the RTD gave them the phrase, "You will be deleted." The 2024 critical gender agenda might just delete the Cybermen that we recognise from Moonbase, Revenge of the Cybermen, Earthshock, and Army of Ghosts. One of our podcasts delved into this worry for many Doctor Who fans. Do you want to see how it went? It hasn't been deleted. The Davros retcon and the logic applied to that by Russell Davies is going to surely resonate across a lot of monsters and a lot of villains for perpetuity, unless somebody can come up with a clever idea. So I'm not going to say my answer yet, but I'll start with, let's have a look. Michelle, where would you like to start? What is your burning issue, your contention with bringing the Cybermen back?
Well, it's 2024, so everything is going to be a contentious and an issue now. So, I mean, everything. Once you start, Pandora, let that out of the box, everything is. I would like to see the Cybermen be a little bit more scarier. They're kind of been used now as a little bit of a joke now and used as a punchline. I mean, the last time we saw the Cybermen, the best acting out of the Power of the Doctor was when the Dalek and the Cybermen looked at each other. And apparently that was actually ad lib, which shows that they had more talent than most of the crew there. But again, I like to see them being scary because they were scary in their original form where you still recognize that there was a person under there. And the one Cyberman smoking a cigarette, how much flammable material is he surrounded with? Yeah, he don't give a flying flip. He's going to have his cigarette.
It's almost a before and after, I think, on that one. But,
I think that was me.
And then in the famous line, this video was used in a BBC training video.
So, well, okay, we've got that one. I just want to get the panel's assessment. Hugh, where would you go with this one? Are they good to go?
I mean, I think A, they've been overused in the last few years, and B, I mean, originally the story in terms of Mondas was barkingly strange, and now, despite the retcon, it just feels to me that we've done everything we possibly can with them. We've taken them back to Mondas origins. We've got them from another universe. We've got them effectively that they appear on every world at some point. I don't think there's anything new to do with them. I think you can have them, but it's the other problem is I'm never really sure what Cybermen want. I mean, I know they want to assimilate all of us, but they are one of these villains whose plans are always ludicrous.
So based on what you're saying, Hugh, let me just flash up the stories that we've had. I'll just give you the running order because I understand what you're saying, and Michelle was saying roughly the same thing. They've been overused to a degree. If I quickly show the stories, and when did you think we started overusing them? You know, there must have been a point when you thought you were happy. So if I just flash up the first lot there, I'm not going to list them all. You've got 10th Planet down to Silver Nemesis there. And then, of course, and that takes us, 20 odd years?
I think they're okay in the original, pretty much. I think sort of like there's occasional bits where you go, that's a bit of a problem. But I think in the original they're generally fine. They're not used a lot, and they don't go into lots of really weird detail about that you need to know about them. So I think that they're okay in the original. I where did he go wrong in New Who? I think when James Corden can blow them up with an emotion,
Yeah.
that's problematic.
And I was interested when I got the 2 pages because I saw how many stories we had in Classic Who and how many new of Cybermen, and the numbers have increased. And that's maybe a point. I just want to, because he's in the thread, and I promised to bring him up. So before I come to another panelist, if anybody wants to kind of comment on JWC Reviews, because there's a little bit of what you were saying there, Hugh. So he said the Cyberwoman was terrible. This is the different point, but ties into why the race was created, the desperate need to survive, even at the cost of sacrificing one's humanity. A bit like communism, really. That could solve all your problems through conversion and ideological uniformity, physically and morally. And then later on, he said they've been on decline for years, as you said, Hugh, turned into just another genetic Robot 4. He should do a Genesis type story, put the Doctor on Mondas. Now, you didn't fancy that, did you? In the period just before the Cybermen were created, give them a fresh take, put the Cybers versions out to pasture. So, any comments on our friend there, JWC Reviews?
Well, JWC Reviews, there's actually, for those who like Big Finish, there is actually an excellent one called Spare Parts with the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa that explores the creation of the goes back to Mondas and sees him converted, and that's one of the only Big Finish that ever made me cry. It's excellent.
Now, Jeremy, I missed you out last time, so I apologise. Jeremy, your thoughts on the burning issue regarding the Cybermen? Are you dying for them to come back in this iteration of Doctor Who?
I'd like them to come back, but not under the present circumstances, situation with Russell T Davies. Having seen them under Chris Chibnall's and the way that they were portrayed, which was abysmal, I'd rather them just not bring them back. I want them back, but I'd rather not bring them back. I'd rather not Russell T Davies not bring them back. If he's going to mess around with them, I'd rather have a really good Cyberman story and so on.
Now, later we will go into detail about whether we can convert them, adapt them to survive in this era, because this era is not going away, it looks like. John, your thoughts?
I'm going to disagree. It would come as no surprise to anybody, with everybody, just because I can. I prefer the Cybermen in New Who than to Classic Who, because they could never really make their mind up about the Cybermen in Classic Who. And towards the end, in the 80s, I'll disagree with you. I think they were overused and they were becoming just cannon fodder for Rastron robots, whoever it was, and indeed for Ace and her big catapult. So already Classic Who had begun to devalue the Cybermen. I like stompy Cybermen. I like marching Cybermen shouting delete. I got kicks out of that, and I thought they brought back scariness to the Cybermen. Even though Age of Steel and Rise of the Cybermen occupies that mid-season slot, I much preferred it to the Daleks in Manhattan and the Sontaran Poison Sky, because I actually thought it had a bit more gravitas and guts to it. It was genuinely scary. I loved the brutality of the cyber process. It was a bit Disney, it was a bit cartoonish, if you like, but I thought it really made its point that this was something horrible happening to human beings as they were converted into Cybermen. And then I loved the particular death scene of the bride, if you remember, talking about reminiscing about what should have been her wedding day. I don't think the Cybermen ever got that sort of treatment in Classic Who. To tip of the hat to Russell Davies and his team for doing that. And I think the Cybermen right up to the end of the Moffat era with World Enough in Time, which to my mind is up there as probably maybe the best cyber story of all time, made the Cybermen really scary, and you felt the pain of people going through that conversion process. And it is a semi-origin story for the Cybermen, maybe not along Genesis, but it is, if you like, that sort of thing. So actually, hats off to New Who, because I think it served the Cybermen better up until, wait for it, Chris Chibnall took over when they became just stupid and silly again.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just chat, and I'm coming, Brandon, don't worry, but you've got David Mullen here. The problem today is that Doctor Who is nervous about doing horror, touching on disturbing concepts like cyber conversion and inhuman predators like this. In a way, what you've just said, though, John, is that we did get the horror back with the World Enough and Time.
But even before that, with the Age of Steel and Rise of the Cybermen, although it was much more cartoonish, there was real body horror implicit in what was going on there. Whereas we just see Cybermen, they talk about "you shall be like us." We never really see the conversion process.
No.
Well, Attack of the Cybermen we did. I thought it was quite clumsily and quite speedily handled. But in Age of the Cybermen, in Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel, you know, those people being lumbered into the back of vans and all the rest of it, and the conversion process was brutal, I thought.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at this point.
Well, as I said, I give a shout out to Peter on his birthday. He said the tunnel sequence.
Happy birthday, Peter.
Hey, Peter, happy birthday.
He said it's in the the tunnel sequence in the Dark Cybermen all lined up gave me chills, and there was some good stuff, and I agree with John partly on that, on how they did realise. Yeah, only partly. Now, Paul Bowler says, what's your favourite Cyberman story? And he says it's Earthshock. I'm going to ask the panel a bit later on that one. So hold on, Paul. We are going to have an element on that. At the moment, we're doing the burning issues and where we think the problems are. But yes, we're definitely going to love bomb the Cybermen too. And it'd be interesting how many agree with Earthshock, possibly. So, Brandon, are they contentious, or am I just trying to find a storm in a teacup here?
I agree with multiple things. Like, I really... I dug what John said, because the first thing I thought about in New Who and the Cybermen was the stakes. And yeah, no, Brendan's never going to have me back. He's going to kick me and John both out. But the Cybermen, there were, not in every episode, but like the episodes that John was referring to, there were definitely stakes, terrifying stakes. You know, you thought maybe Jackie or whoever is going to get converted. And then, of course, there's that "I did my duty" lady that, you know, from Torchwood or whatever. Yeah. And so that's right. And then I dig how they did the origin in that Peter Capaldi episode. Was it one episode or two? I can't remember, but two. And I dug that. That was cool. But what really, and also shout out to JWC. He comes and watches us on the council sometimes too. I think his idea about going back like classic Who, Genesis of the Daleks type story and going back to Mondas, I would be down for that. But my only problem, the final thing I'll say on it is it's hard for me to think about much positive, because all I can think of is like the cyber Time Lord stuff. I don't know, you know what I mean? And that was the first thought I had when you mentioned like doing a new story, because all I can think is that roadblock standing in my way. Yeah. And it's like it you know, maybe it's a so decent visual, but like with many things,
the worst sort of fan fiction.
Right. And that, well, Brendan said something.
Cybermen was good until they went over to back to Gallifrey. Ascension is a decent story. The minute it goes off the rails is the minute they go to Gallifrey, because you see the has actually run out of ideas.
Brendan said something, I think it was on y'all's show last week, that he was talking about how the fighting between the Cybermen and the Daleks seemed like fan fiction, and that made me kind of stop, because I mean I'm 42, but I never watched the old show growing up. They did show some reruns over here, but I just wasn't into that. And what actually got me to go back and watch old Who and embrace and appreciate it was how bad New Who got. So I love old Who, classic Who, better than I do New Who at this point. But
I'm in the same boat. I went into classic after New Who.
So you found me there.
The big problem with that is whenever you put the Cybermen next to the Daleks, then the Cybermen are pathetic. Right. And that underlines the problems with the Cybermen. That wasn't a fair fight.
Yeah, the twain should never have met there. I mean, I could see them meeting in certain circumstances, but maybe not at that point yet.
Now, can I say one?
I think they shot the bolt a bit too early with that.
Exactly.
They should have really have delayed that, having to do it so soon. And when New Who came back, it was obviously by the end of the second season, this program wasn't going anywhere soon. So you really could have held on to that and teased it. It was always going to end, you know, with nobody really liking it. It turned out to be a bit of a bitch fest than it did a fight, a clash of the Titans. And yeah, he was right. The Cybermen we're always going to come second to the Daleks, purely because I'm sure the Terry Nation estate would never let the Daleks loose.
Well, I'll raise my contention regarding, yes, like Jeremy says, I'd love to bring them back, but then you worry about people reading into things or overreading things. So my issue is, in 2024, with what RTD has been saying about Davros so far, I start to concern myself that if Davros is problematic regarding the imagery and the logic, surely there's a problem with the Cybermen going back to their origins in the 10th planet, which is they had cancerous parts replaced, they had diseased parts replaced. They basically gave themselves a version of immortality by replacing parts. I have to shout out Jerry Davis and Dr. Kit Pedler ahead of their time. They were ahead of the $6 Million Man. They were ahead of the Borg. They were ahead of various other versions and iterations of this. And, you know, if Davros is problematic to our showrunner now, surely humans relying on a support system, on mechanics, on technology, which apparently is problematic with Davros, is going to be equally problematic as cyber people. I'm sure Cybermen's going to be problematic, but cyber people, the cyber race, I just cannot see how we can get past that logic problem that he's created, not me.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right. But I think they could also conveniently find a way around that. They're very good at that, you know, in terms of whatever the burning issue for them is, that they'll make excuses and give reasons. But then, as we've done on this channel, and the other people have done in print, stack the evidence against them for saying, well, why not the Daleks then? Because, you know, they too have been disabled and as a result of mutation and are trundling around on wheels as well. So you could make any excuse for that sort of nonsense up. But I'm sure in the same way that they will find a way to keep the Daleks, they'll find a way to keep some form of cyber conversion in Doctor Who as well. And I don't think they'll have any problems calling them Cybermen, because men
are evil.
men are evil, you know. A lot of men are, you know, but not all men. But men as a sex tend to get the whip hand in life, and tend to get slagged off by this iteration of Doctor Who showrunner.
John, while we've got you in this lovely, optimistic, open-minded thing, I'll advertise Tuesday and see if you sound the same. There you go. So we're going to see an open-minded. We're going to have a very open-minded, optimistic John on Tuesday. There you go, on the trial of Chris Chibnall on 4 p.m.
I heard
he was one of those bars of bent. I tried to push his head through them.
I've heard that he was even a jerk then.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's, as you know, that's from Open Air, that one, isn't it? That shot when he's
a little smug back then.
You know, that famous interview when he talked about how badly written Doctor Who was.
Yeah, he's talking about it's just people running around in hallways and stuff, and he came along and was like, the worst ever.
As an American saying, he's going to say, "Hey, bitch, hold my beer." Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Just while you were saying, sort of a shout out to Jerry Davis, Kit Pedler. I think it was bang on trend for that. But obviously, as Doctor Who has given the nod as well with The Haunting of Villa Diodati, it is Mary Shelley.
Yes.
Who is behind this. And, you know, to an extent, I think it's interesting that I don't think they've ever done the Cybermen as well as Frankenstein does a monster.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it was the concept at the beginning. What was your understanding in the 10th planet? I mean, they were trying to move the 2 planets, weren't they? Yeah. They were a race who had they were regenerating themselves in their own way, weren't they? And it wasn't about world domination or anything. It wasn't about galaxy domination and all that stuff. It was a survival issue, as a few people on the thread have said.
I think, although the inspiration may well be due to Shelley, I don't think Doctor Who can repeat that. And it did it better, perhaps, within the brain of Morbius, when it's one creation, you know, that's been sort of sewn together by Solon. Cybermen, it's a race of people, you know, initially replacing 1 or 2 parts, and then that slowly but surely discovering that they need to do more of it, and then eventually taking emotion out because it's just inefficient. So I don't think the Mary Shelley comparison works, other than, you know, it's body parts, but I just don't think it works. That comparison works more with Brain of Morbius than it does for that, because there are multiple Cybermen, multiple. So you're always into an invasion thing or a taking over the world type thing that they'll get that. And their ultimate aim is to convert everybody. You know, the sad thing about Modern Who is that the only thing is they're turning the Daleks similarly into that, is that Daleks are no longer racially pure. They're turning everybody into Dalek if you can get their hands on it, which is which is a bit silly, you know.
Yeah, definitely on that one. Now, just as where we are here, I just want to kind of, so we've set out our burning issues, but there's an awful lot to look at. We're going to be looking at, is there an argument for just evolving them, as there sometimes have been, converting them or deleting them? Is there a way of surviving the woke world? So we're going to be looking at that. But just to give us a brief item, just to liven up the squad again, so to speak, let us just have this. Right, straight to it. No messing today. So Time Teak Roadshow, some people are a regular will know, is when we say, what would you like to bring back? Now, obviously, we're doing a cyber special. And like I said, we're going to get back to more of the contentious issues in a minute. We had Lady Painfort in Silver Nemesis. Would you bring that villain back? Would you bring those androids from Earthshock back? Would you bring the Raston Rore robot in the guise of Jamie back? Would you bring the Vogons back from Revenge of the Cybermen? I quite liked and I was fascinated by that story. Or would you bring the Cryons back from Attack of the Cybermen? Right, over to the panel. Jeremy first.
Oh, I'd bring back the Vogons.
Now, why would that be?
Visually, they were more interesting, I think. And like I say, you could go back to Wookiee Hole again and do some more filming.
And we will be talking about what our favourite stories are. I'm going to be giving too much away as I go here, so I'm going to try and keep out of it. Crimpling wants Lady Painfort back. I was fascinated by that whole story. I wasn't fascinated by Silver Nemesis, but I think there were little elements there that could be interesting. However, that's not my opinion being shared quite yet. Michelle?
The androids. That's where interesting, like this kind of, not quite Cybermen, but the kind of, they're using them to do their dirty work.
It was an interesting one when we get to Earthshock, that two parts and in the caves, a bit like Wookiee Hole, in the caves are more studio bound this time, and the androids were interesting. It was dark, it was sinister, and the death all over the floor. John?
Yeah, I never understood the need for the androids, apart from keeping the idea of the Cybermen secret from us. I don't know why the Cybermen need androids. They can do it themselves. So I think it was just to keep a secret. So I'd bring back the Rastron Warrior robot, preferably not in your husband's pajamas, because I think that had great potential. I enjoyed the whole spectacle of it. I think for its time, it was one of the better effects done in Doctor Who. And the Cyber Massacre was one of those ones that was genuinely horrifying. This thing was getting the better of them. And then it just, later on when we get gold doubloons of puncturing their chest units and killing them is all a bit silly. But this is genuinely terrifying. And that scene with the Cybermen vomits up goo after getting done in by the robot was great. So yes, bring back the Rastron, the tightly costumed Raston Warrior robot. He's a nice wee bum too.
I like when they cut his head off. He did the decapitation, and that's like borderline pushing it for your guys' censors at that time period.
That was that. Tell me if I'm wrong. John Nathan Turner directed that, didn't he?
He ran a second unit. Yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah. And I think they had to tone it down too, because it wasn't going to pass censors. They had to tone it down, and it's still awesome.
And I think we really have to thank that it was John Nathan Turner, because I think left to the capable hands of Peter Moffat, it might have looked like an afternoon tea with the Cybermen.
I know. Brandon, what would you bring back if you had a choice?
Mine's going to be unpopular. I'm the odd man out here. I actually liked what was the name of that story with Lady Painfort? What was it called?
Silver Nemesis.
Silver Nemesis. I like. There was some about that story that I liked. The whole, I believe it was Shakespearean times, and just the way that story unfolded. A lot of people don't like it, but I thought that would be a evil character to resurrect somehow or something. Who knows?
She was good. She was good.
Yeah.
She was.
She was Fiona. The actress's name.
Fiona Walker.
Yeah.
Agrippina in I, Claudius.
Yeah.
She was
Good
also
actress.
she was also in the Keys of Marinus way back at the beginning.
Oh gosh, I'd have to check that one out. That's a good call.
You don't have to check it. I just told you.
I'll check it nonetheless.
Well, you're wasting your time. I've just told you.
I mean, I'll check it to watch it. Hugh, what would you bring back?
I'm actually going to agree with Brandon. I think because it was Fiona Walker, it was very well played. I don't think the story necessarily hangs together, but I think it had lots of interesting ideas. I think, it's just one of those ones where if you get a really good character actor doing a villain, and I don't think we get enough of those now. I think we tend to get villains who are a bit mild for my liking.
Well, and now we go. I mean, I have to say, when I went through this, it was either between, I nearly was going to go for the Vogons. I do like Lady Painfort's character, and I think you could explore a lot more. But I did think the Raston Warrior robot as a species and how lethal they were. Come on, there's a story there. There has to be. I mean, they were
agreeing with me.
I'm agreeing that I am right on thinking what I think.
After I said I was right.
Well, of course, because I was so polite at letting you go first.
I mean, that's the only problem I have with the Raston Warrior robot. I mean, when was it ever going to lose? It's too hard.
Well, apparently it had to rearm because it had to stash of weapons. John Pertwee, the third doctor, had found. I just wonder where it stopped and put all those things. Did it have a Raston Warrior robot's assistant who sort of did all that for it? I don't know. But either way, it was pretty mean killing machine.
It was. And we wonder, well, I say I want a bit of that. I mean, this is before you'd even go on about Eric Saywood and everything. This is this is classic little story. That right? Okay, then that was just our we've done the burning issues, we've set that out. Now I need to go into a bit more detail, and this is where our panel, you can go anywhere in the 60 years, and I'll try and keep up with you. But basically, my first question is really regarding this: is do you think we can evolve the Cybermen in a way that would be acceptable now? And if you do, in what shape would they be? Now, I hear, for example, John was saying he liked the more New Who Cybermen. He liked the Stomp. I thought they were a bit Borg-like, because I disagree with John. But yeah, I also do agree with John. For example, the Mondasian Cybermen, I did think that really, really was horror show.
We have Peter Capaldi could thank for that, because he did specifically request their return.
And I agree with you on the Mary Shelley front regarding that was probably one of the more interesting stories in the Chibnall era, with the Cybermen there.
Not written by him.
True. Shad, that lone Cyberman. So, can we bring them back in this present iteration? Can we convert them, or is that problematic regarding cyber history, blah, blah, blah?
I'll come in if you want. I don't know why there would be a problem, apart from the fact that they've painted themselves into a corner with the whole Davros thing. But other than that, there is literally nothing wrong with the Cybs as they start. And I won't use Cyberman, whatever, just the cyber race as they began calling themselves in the 80s. I don't see a problem. It's spare part surgery taken to the nth degree, and ultimately they've programmed out all emotions too. I don't know how anybody is going to be offended by that. Wheelchair users were not offended by Davros, so that offence was taken by able-bodied people on their behalf, and it backfired on them. So If there is an issue with the Cybs as exist, it's purely because they've painted themselves into a corner. It's a perfectly acceptable premise that science can be taken too far, whether that is industrial science, which is leading, we're told, to the death of the planet, or it's biological science, wherein we take it to this point where the human species may stop being human. Why would that be a problem?
Right. Well, let me raise this. Let's have a fight. Let's have a real debate here. A sense for we can do it. John, the reason why I had a problem with the Stompy, it wasn't necessarily how they marched, but it was the fact that they were Borg-like, is that they were one entity. And the Cybermen, I never had the idea were all one entity. They were just in each individual human who had been changed because they were diseased, etc. And so why the hell can you defeat them by they all have this emotional collective consciousness? That's the evolution of them that's gone wrong.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Right, they were made to look like a sort of hive mentality, and that these were all drones, all serving the cyber controller when he came along. I don't watch Star Trek, so I was totally unaware of the Borg. My husband leave watching Cyberman, the Star Trek, to my husband. So he made the comparison with the Borg. So I had no trouble with that. I just thought that given Doctor Who's audience is mostly children, that I thought it was a great gimmick. It's easily done in the playground or out in the streets, and that's Doctor Who's first job. In the same way that Daleks, little wheelie things with sticky out arms saying exterminate, that the Cybermen were easily impersonatable by children, and they were given a catchphrase, delete. And I think that's good. I think that's absolutely good. Whether or not it ties in with the fact that they're all still individuals, maybe yes, maybe no, but nonetheless, we have armies, and armies have colonels and captains and platoon leaders. And if you look at the privates, they're all marching in step. So there is a human comparison there as well.
This, please, people jump in because I'm going to keep knocking back on John. The stomping, you could say, almost started with Earthshock because we all seem to we loved Earthshock regarding that sequence when Peter Davison's Doctor looked at the screen and you could see them all marching towards him. And I think since then, we've had each director's tried to make them more in unison when they never really were. Look at them walking down St. Paul's Cathedral steps. They're all doing their own thing. I just thought you've missed the point, not you, but the writers, that they're all individual.
What about my point, though? It's very easy for children, the principal audience, you would imagine, that this Doctor Who's aimed for, gives them something to imitate and go for. So isn't that a good thing?
Well, imitation's good, but then after that you need substance, don't you?
There was enough substance there, but you gave the children a chance to run around the school playground saying delete and stomping. What's not to like?
The collective consciousness of the Cybermen that got evolved by New Who was as problematic to me as Remembrance of the Daleks, when you had a spinning Dalek who suddenly went into non-existence because it couldn't cope with this existential threat that Sylvester McCoy was staring it out. You know, that kind of thing is where I think you set the seeds for disaster. But anyway, there's me and John having a good tennis match.
I think there's one of the things that I struggle with is the fact that in doing that, what they then came up with was fighting against it. So you have Tracy Ann Oberman, you have James Corden, you have whoever played Danny Pink, and that always seems to me that you're setting it up that you've got the character who can fight off the Cybermen, whereas I think it works better if you have characters within Cybermen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, each one. I mean, because again, it's the illogicality that with New Who, Age of Steel, moving to Doomsday, that period, especially the one you were mentioning, Brandon, the Torchwood leader who got converted. She was crying almost as she walked in to be converted, and I know John said that was one of the horror moments. And And I agree with him. And yeah, I think later on in one of the episodes, it's as if there was a tear from her because she was fighting.
Yeah.
So there was an individual element, as Hugh was saying, and that there was something about that. That's more horrifying to me. That there's still an essence within there, but like when we saw Lytton, and you could see the human within the Cyberman to a point, and that surely does take us truthfully back to the 10th planet, rather than some of the new Who mumbo jumbo that's been made up. Sorry, Michelle. I'll go on here.
Sorry, just it depends on which story you take. So Danny Pink is effectively saying that everyone is individual, that they still have that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure years ago that the Cybermen used to have individual names.
In 10th Planet, they did, yes.
And TV
They did in the original, because I've read the book.
Or something like that.
I mean, and Taddy Spider, hiya Terry, he was saying, with all individuality removed, how could a Cyberman become a leader? Well, how would they choose?
Well,
yeah.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. Nepotism.
So, yes, good point. You've broken the logic there, I tell you. And Cybermat Strikes, I don't like how Rise of Steel Cybermen are brains in metal suits. I agree with Brendan. Oh, I had to bring this one up, John.
Yeah.
They lost too much. Yeah, you see, you've got Brandon, I've got Cybermat Strikes, so 1-1.
Mom and dad are fighting.
So,
but one thing I just wanted to say real quick, Brendan, I think they're missing, if RTD wasn't the one in charge of this, if it was somebody who, say, had the similar motivations of people when they were running Classic Who, they're missing a golden opportunity. The Cybermen is basically where we're going anyway, almost in life, with the transhumanists and all that stuff. They're missing a golden opportunity to do a story of some sort of future Earth Cybermen, something to just a warning almost. But I would imagine the people RTD runs with are more toward the side that want to transcend than the ones that want to stop.
They want to lead us for having different opinions.
Exactly. And so I just
to agree with you and to hopefully reinforce a few points. And I saw Hugh was agreeing as well. John Coogan, who's in our Facebook community and supports us quite nicely, one of our friends, he said earlier in his text to our advert, he reckoned that the Cybermen are an allegory for communism. Wokeism has communist traits. They insist we are alike and identical, yet they're screaming for diversity at the same time. And so it kind of, you're saying how topical it is, Brandon. And I think John Coogan's saying the same thing. There's some very apt and maybe some biting points that could be made.
Totally agree with him on that.
The technology is much closer as well. So it's it's much more opposite now than it's ever
there'd
been.
Be much more verisimilitude of getting turned into of society getting turned into robots or cyborgs or whatnot is much more believable nowadays. You're perfectly correct on that. Oh yeah, David Banks. Yeah. He wrote a couple of the books too.
There's a possibility in terms of reinventing the notion of the Cybermen that if, given the green agenda, that in order for humans perhaps to live in an ever-warming climate ravaged by man's plundering of the Earth's natural resources and use of fossil fuels, that perhaps replacement surgery is going to be necessary for human beings to survive, and there's a possible route for them to take down that road. We should tie in a lot of their favorite tropes in terms of, that as a result of man's or human beings destruction of the planet as a result of industrialization, that the solution may well be Cybernation, turning us into cyber, and that gradual slow development in the human body in order for us to survive in a potentially ever-changing and ever-worsening climate. That could be a whole story arc that they choose to go on. Which would be interesting. It would depend how it was done, whether it would be good or not, but it's a potential avenue to take.
I agree there's possibilities here on how we could actually sit them into 2024, 2025 and have a message. I mean, it was mentioned in the thread ages ago about Cybermen and the new message they might have. Just before we lose it, a few little points. And Dada Debaser, delete was a silly catchphrase created for the Cybermen, and John is completely wrong. Sorry, I've added that last bit. But on top of that, just before we go, Scottish Davros, and I know Brandon just said he agreed. You had David Banks, who was the cyber leader in quite a few stories. And of course, he brought personality and identity to a Cyberman. And part
He wasn't supposed to have it.
It wasn't, but we all liked it, didn't we? I mean,
he embraced it.
But, you know, but when they broke the mold in terms of that trait of the Cybermen, you didn't complain about that. But you complain when they go back to the more homogenized look to the Cybermen and stomping about. You're not happy about it. Make your mind up.
Well, I never liked the stomping. The stomping, it was like Strictly Come Dancing, but
you're dancing, yeah.
Yeah, it's like some sort of line dancing competition. So,
yeah, Banks wrote one of the new adventure books I've read called Iceberg. So he really embraced being that character, almost like the guy that played the Master. You know.
Well, what about before we go too much further? I mean, a lot of us might have that, mightn't we? The essential Doctor Who Cybermen, right? Mm-hmm. And within these pages, it talks about Jerry Davis in the early 80s. He'd been doing other stuff, of course, but he kind of regained some interest in Doctor Who when Earthshock came back. And he had written The Origins of the Cybermen, a prequel to the 10th Planet. And just like we have Genesis of the Daleks, and that was a hell of a good origin story, RTD and Chris Chibnall have now given origin stories a bad name, but Jerry Davis in the early 80s had come up with a full planned out prequel. And if I said just one line from it, there's pages of it, by the way, but one of the lines is, it's the Peter Davison Doctor with Perry. And they went back to Mondas, BC, they said. So it's thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And the Doctor
for Cybermen,
and the Doctor accidentally gave the technology to start the process off, which almost sounds like Destination Skaro, but we won't go there. But Jerry Davis had a plan, and you know, origin stories do have a bad name, but does anybody like the idea of really doing a prequel to the 10th Planet? So we, rather than keep evolving them, we go back to their origins properly and understand what actually a Cyberman is.
I have no problem with it as long as it's done well. And one thing I was, trying to say earlier, and my concern is there's plenty of places for good Cyberman stories that you can make out of today that are topical. But does the writers have the bravery to do that? Because you may gasp, offend somebody.
Negative. Yeah,
because he may actually be offending maybe the sideline that are his biggest champions, because that's the problem, is where they don't allow anybody to criticize their side.
Yeah, I think there's scope to do this. That could you go back 2 pictures, Brendan? That fantastic, scary, that one, isn't that?
That looks awesome.
What a really terrifying picture that is. Considering those costumes cost about £3. To make, they are absolutely brilliant. And this is always been my thing about Doctor Who, being done on a wing and a prayer, sometimes being better than having a big budget, because those are classic. And the Skyman's ear handles come out of a classic, cheaply made costume like that. Fantastic. But to go back to the point I was going to make, if they do decide to make an origin story for Cybermen, even if it's as good as Genesis of the Daleks, which is the original and best origin story, you have to remember they changed established lore about the Daleks, the initial Davros and all that. And if they did something along those lines, fandom, not all of it, but a good sized proportion of it, and we know who we were talking about here, would come down on them like a ton of bricks. Except go back to 1975, and everything changed with Genesis of the Cybermen, and that's now accepted as a cast iron classic, if not the most popular Doctor Who story of all time.
I'm up for it. Are you? Jeremy, would you be back to Origins? Would you like a prequel, or would you rather we never touched Origins ever again? Timeless Children is where we end up.
Yeah, that's just the worry, that it could end up like a timeless children story, and I wouldn't have any confidence in Russell T Davies for actually doing it and doing it properly at the moment. It may be better in the hands of a different producer, whoever comes along next, I think. But I mean, it'd be nice to see the Cybermen come back, but it's got to be a really good story to do it.
Well, I'm listening to what a lot of us have been saying in the last hour, and we seem to be saying, give or take, that they've evolved, and we've lost a little bit of what they were. And actually, really, it might be a good time to actually properly go back to the beginning. It would use John's points up, Hugh's points up, etc., and Michelle's about. All of you actually, you've all said various things about, the climate, talking about green issues, talking about the use really of cybernetics nowadays in medicine and morals and everything, that we could maybe really go back now. It's a good time to go back. Now, Crimplin says a good 10th Planet prequel would work well if at first we don't know that the story is set on Mondas. Actually, Crimplin, the Jerry Davis write-up I was seeing, Peter Davison's doctor doesn't know it's Mondas for quite a while until... Does that ring a bell? John, you're nodding your head. Have you read the same thing?
I'm just agreeing with the actual premise of that. It's an excellent idea if it can be done well. And it requires a huge amount of secrecy, because obviously, ultimately, there would have to be a reveal of the cyber body or carapace or suit, or whatever it is at the end of that. But I think the premise of that whether or not the Doctor helps in the original Jerry Davis idea in the creation of these Cybermen, but the idea of the Doctor being present at the birth of Cybermen and not knowing until the first one appears is a super idea.
And this was used. This was used for the audio drama Spare Parts. This is completely spare parts.
Yeah. And
that was a novel before it was an audio drama too, was it not?
Yeah, audio drama was in the early. So it sounds like they took the plot line from this draft, turned it into Spare Parts, and this is what then it was kind of used for the Age of Steel. But Spare Parts was way better.
Yes.
Yeah, and that Archibald, as Lazarus said this earlier, I had it up earlier. Spare Parts do it so well, Teachman and Brendan. Just pinch the script. And Jerry Davis had it in the 80s. JWC Reviews. What you need are some Cybermen who aren't normal Cybermen, like Borg Hugh in The Next Generation. Then get the Cybermen, maybe led by a Shad, to hunt them down as heretics. JWC, does this take us down the Dalek Civil War path, which I don't know if I've found is tedious? It looked good for a second, but in Resurrection of the Daleks, when you had one set of Daleks fighting another set, what did Tegan say in the end? She got tired of it. I'm not sure. TARDIS Spider, Unknown Mysteries, the foundation of the series. It was better the less we knew. I agree with that, TARDIS Spider, Terry, but it's 60 years old. You can't keep... I mean, Andrew Cartmel tried to bring the mystery back, but it just, to me, it looked like contrived mystery. You were just trying to, and it was, the Hand of Omega and all that stuff. I mean, that wasn't, I don't know. Couldn't buy into that. Now I'm going to...
Can I just pick up on one point that John made about, sort of like, in terms of budget? I thought that in terms of Bill Potts as a Cyberman, it was properly scary, and it was properly scary because it was that type of costume. Yeah. And that's up to date now, that even in a world where there was much more money spent on the sort of like the other Cybermen, that's still a much scarier costume whenever you see it up front. It just is.
Yes. No, it was a good call by Peter Capaldi to ask for them to come back, because I think we'd all read them, and I have to say, while we're at it, I'll just talk about, because me and John were talking about this the other day, and I just wanted a convenient moment to talk about it, which is...
You better be careful. People start thinking you and I like each other.
Oh, I know. Cherish the thought. I mean, I do have nightmares. No, so we have remember we were talking about the Target books, weren't we, John?
Yes.
And the truth is, when I looked at the list of cyber stories that had been all the way up to Sylvester McCoy, and then how many more there were in New Who, we were quite lucky because we were rationed. I mean, for my age, Revenge of the Cybermen was the first proper story, and then you had a massive gap till Earthshock. So I think, like John and like Hugh and like others, the 10th Planet we read first, the Cybermen we read first, Tomb of the Cybermen we read first, and of course this is where the illustrations kicked in and the Phantom Piper, and they actually, I thought they became almost legendary in my head, the Cybermen, before I actually properly saw them. And that's better than actually using them too much. A bit like what we were saying earlier on in our chat.
Yeah, and that's all true. Everything you just said is absolutely true. But that's what being a child is, and reading a book, and you create your own pictures in your head, and nothing that we saw was ever going to live up to that. I don't think that's anything to do with the frequency or the number of times we see the Cybermen. That's just particularly the book, the Cybermen, which is based on the Moon-based, is one of the most terrifying books I ever read as a child. Which those illustrations, one of which is on the right-hand side of the screen there, and one particularly on the left where the guy goes to get sugar and there's a shadow of the Cyberman, terrified the bejesus out of me back in the day. So these are excellent, but I think it's childhood shaping these memories rather than overuse of the Cybermen as a result, Brendan, to be honest with you, I think.
Okay.
They are slightly overused because we either get a season finale where it's either the Daleks or the Cybermen, or now it's the Daleks and the Cybermen. I mean, Russell T. Davies said, "Oh, in the special series, we're not going to reuse the Daleks. Okay, we use it in Destination Scarrow." So it's in the last, the new era, they can't get away with doing a season finale without one of the two big headliners. And now it's, you like the one, you like the two, you're going to like them together.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, I'm a one for episodic Doctor Who, but these two-parters with the Cybermen, they're just the cliffhangers I found problematic. The gender debate. I said Cybermen, and I think on one of my tweets I said, will there be the Cybermen? And I know John referenced this earlier and said, no, I think there will be. But will they turn into the cyber race, or will they turn into something like this? Because Torchwood has already done this, haven't they? And it's a very sexualized form, really, very adult version of the cyber story. And I know people do like this episode, and I'm not slating the episode, but is this where we're going to go? Because we did have an episode a long time ago, now it feels like, when we talked about the over-sexualization in the TARDIS, maybe, and how everything's much more emotional. So all I'm putting out there is, with the gender debate and all the rest of it, is this where we would be going next? Is this a problem, by the way? What are your thoughts?
I think it might be. It depends on what Russell T. Davies wants to do with the Cybermen.
He's got to figure out a way where you can see the skin color like this, diversity and everything. You know what I'm saying? So they're too sealed up because you can't see what's underneath. So they'll have to figure out a way to show them as more human or something.
They're not going to have the faceplate anymore, because that's one criticism on superhero movies is that nobody wears the face mask anymore.
Agreed. Yeah.
And
Judge Dredd should never take his helmet off.
And Jerry Davis did want, in the original, in the 10th Planet, he did want more of the face, and he did want more of the limbs shown. Obviously, the battle with costume designers and everything, it turned out very different. But and most of the panel have said they liked that iteration anyway. However, we're in a different world. Torchwood has set the chain out there. Chris Chibnall being popular and all the rest of it. Aye. Can you see how this would happen, Hugh and John?
I think I don't think you're going to get that much skin for a variety of reasons. I think you could certainly get something that is closer to the Jerry Davis thing and has Cybermen that have different palps. Stuff like this. So we've had the face with Danny Pink.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the face with that. So I can see having. Again, if we go down the line that we're talking about earlier in some form of Genesis, where it's not a full body replacement. It's just part body replacement, and that becomes much more horrific in some ways. Whether you get away with that, because that I think runs into the Davros problem.
Yeah.
I
John?
didn't like this at all. This is Chris Chibnall again.
Yeah.
Chris Chibnall.
And also, Torchwood was much more adult. This is
Chris
much
Chibnall.
more
No, I'm
adult.
just clearing my throat. Chris Chibnall, will come as no surprise to anybody, is a hack. And he wrote this garbage. And this is the inner fanboy again. This is why fans shouldn't be running shows like Doctor Who anymore, because that's something that he probably wrote on an A4 bit of or his school exercise book way back in the 80s or 90s, whenever it was, you know what I mean? So it should never have been made to the screen. It's highly sexualized. And I think people certain aspects of fandom, sort of having sexual kicks at this sort of stuff, is not what Doctor Who's about. It's absolutely not what Doctor Who's about. If they're going to show this sort of stuff, yes, they could maybe have someone with an arm and a leg and a limb or a chest unit, whatever it is, and go down that route if they plan to. But that sort of stuff, absolutely not. Because even when it was done post Watershed, as someone mentioned in the thread, it's still wrong. It's still not right. They're taking some of the iconography of Doctor Who and sexualizing it in a post-Watershed show. Just don't do it. Don't touch it. Invent your own stuff if that's what you want to do, and leave Doctor Who's iconography to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
You know, there's some guys at Marvel Studios and some people running DC and Marvel Comics that could really use to hear that same thing, John. That's true for so many things, man.
I don't watch any other genre, to be honest with you, Brandon, but I absolutely hear from other fans and from within my own family about how they've messed with a whole range of brands. And interestingly, Brendan, as a segue here, I was talking to George, my husband, who talked about how he watched Picard. I don't, but he said the second season had become tremendously woke and really struggled with it. But they learned their lesson, and come the third season, he thought it was excellent. It had gone back to basics. Yeah. So the point about that is there is a way out of this for these production teams who are investing in this sort of agenda. There's a way of turning it around. So hopefully that'll happen in Doctor Who too.
But they'll have to listen to the lesson, and there's many people that speculate that what happened with Picard was just a flash in the pan, and that you're not going to see that again because the producer or the director was given free reign for Picard season 3, and so it wasn't under the major. From the way I'm understanding, it wasn't under the major supervision, so they were allowed to do what they're allowed to do.
Yeah,
that was all Terry Matalas.
But he was very, very complimentary about what was damaged goods. In season 2, and then season 3 was fantastic. You know, it's strange to find any brand or program to have one person being able to run it without interference like that. So more power to them if they manage to get their way.
Now, Jeremy, you're surrounded by paraphernalia there. I'm going to zoom in for a second. So,
Cyber Jeremy.
I mean, what did you think of the Cyberwoman, for example, since we're talking about the gender debate and changing the Cybermen?
I didn't watch it when it was first on, just out of curiosity, because I wasn't really into Torchwood, but I can't even tell you what the plot was about now, other than there was a Cyberwoman in it. But I guess if Russell T Davies does bring the Cybermen back, he'll call them the Cyber Race, and there will be this sort of, the message going around in it. And that's why I just hope that Russell T Davies does not bring back the Cybermen, even though I do want them back. I don't think it's worth the risk of him tampering with them, to be honest. But the message, I think that he'll try and get the message back in again at every opportunity in every story. So I think it's somewhat predictable in that respect.
You've got to vote for your shirt, by the way. Crimplin's just voting for your shirt, so let me just bring it back in there. There we go.
I've been cybernized.
That's it. That's it.
Excuse me.
They've cybernized me.
Yes, you've already been converted. You're a lost cause now. That's it.
I thought you were saying that's what his shirt was made of, Crimpling.
I'm the Nightmare in Silver.
That's it. That's it. Well, you know, you've dressed for the occasion, as a certain
Right.
villain did say.
I didn't
So
want to get out-silvered by them.
no, not at all. You can't have that. So I am finding this problematic. This idea that, and I know John's saying there's a inconsistency in my argument slightly, which is there's the stomping Borg thing I don't like. I do like them to have a bit of individuality, and I do like each cyber person man to have a bit. It's nice to see a bit left of them, or like the cyber leader David Banks, that they have a bit of character because they are all different. I mean, come on, when you saw the 5 Doctors, there was a short ass Cyberman, wasn't there? He was the deputy. He was never going to get promoted. He was just short ass. And then you had the tall one, David Banks, who was lording it over. I mean, they are all different. They're from different humans. You know, that's the essence.
I'm just reminded of Monty Python, Life of Brian. Yes, we are all individuals. And do that with Cybermen. Yeah, I mean, but the problem you have is there has to be something that's also horrific about some form of assimilation. Whether it's the again, I think probably we're back at some of the comments here. You know, the Bill Potts stuff is the best that's been done.
Yes. I like I loved the horror of when the Doctor at certain points, by the time he got her, because it was such a massive ship, wasn't it? There was time periods, and she'd already been, converted to replace the parts and that whole chest unit and everything. And it's mind you, they started to unravel it slightly, didn't they? But the whole point was it's permanent. You can't take that away. I mean, that was the whole point. That was the drama of Lytton, wasn't it? Lytton. You can't save him. He's already on the way. That was the horror. I liked Attack of the Cybermen for that respect. I know it gets its, arguments and stuff. Now, while we're on this, we've kind of quickly talked about the LGBT gender debate type thing. Right. Okay, then. Favorite cyber story and the reason why. Why did you think the story you're about to list really sold the Cybermen or understood them really well? Brandon, where would you go first? I know you said you're watching Tomb today.
I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was my favorite, but I did dig it, and it was the first time I had watched it. My favorite, and it's for really cheap reasons, but I liked the 5 Doctors a lot. I just like that whole thing. I like the thought of them bringing in, past doctors. I wish William Hartnell had still been alive and healthy, because that is a little off-putting to have a different actor as the first Doctor. But I just like that one. And you have to understand too, when I went back and I started from The Robot with Tom Baker when I did my first watch through of Old Who, and so I was looking forward to getting to that episode because it looked cool to me, so I dug.
What regarding the Cybermen, what was it about the 5 Doctors that you liked and how they were presented or used?
The bad thing is it's more about the setting and everything that was going on, with Barusa and Raslan and all that stuff. I was more into the Time Lord Gallifreyan stuff probably, but I just liked them kind of being the foe that they were having to fight in that death zone. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry, Brandon. The one snag I had with it regarding the Cybermen was, and I loved the fact when, it was the Brigadier and the second Doctor and they were whacking their hand or the glove of a metal, you got an element there, and then they were champing away, cyber bomb around the TARDIS and everything, wondering why they're in the death zone. But I didn't like it when the Master seemed to kind of out-trick them. That was when I lost it. Now, regarding this bit here, which I think John shouted out earlier was with my great photographs, thought it was going to be that rather than the chessboard. I don't know if this is only for the British panelists here, but did anyone think when you saw the 5 Doctors and that kind of flooring, did anyone think of that?
Yeah, the adventure game.
No,
yeah.
No, I thought more of Death to the Daleks, to be honest with you.
True.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah.
But I loved that kind of idea, although it made no sense, did it? Because when the Richard Herndl Doctor went across and Tegan followed, they didn't follow in steps sequence. So I didn't. And then when he shouted out "bye,"
That again, that's thanks to the wonderful Peter Moffat, who's having a lovely cup of tea and a sponge finger in the director's box, when all that was going on, and just saying, "I'll do whatever you want, darling." That's fine by me. Interestingly, the fact that the Cybermen are in the Five Doctors, Terrence Dicks, who wrote the thing, said that Eric Saward had insisted that he put the Cybermen in as the main villain because, as Terrence Dicks himself said, Saward bloody loved the Cybermen. He wasn't so keen, but it was at Saward's insistence they had such a big part in the Five Doctors.
Yeah. So Brandon, do you feel as though you've covered your favourite Cyberman story, or you were just telling us why you like the Five Doctors overall? So I'll give you a chance to say, is any cyber story you go, no, that is a good cyber story, before I go to the other panelists?
Oh, I liked Earthshock because they killed Adric, but other than that, no.
You keep giving Brandon. You keep listing non-Cyberman reasons. Right. Okay. Hugh.
I, despite the fact that I think they've been overused, I think More Than Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls is the best use of Cybermen because of Bill Potts. It's because it actually whenever other people are fighting against, when it's James Corden or Tracy Ann Oberman or whatever, it's not done as well, it's not done as dramatically, and it's not done as scarily. And that's the best it's been done.
Right. I'm trying not to butt in with my own there. With the world, I know the Bill Potts thing is a horror show and the hole and the chest and all the rest of it, and then the silent screaming element to it. Yeah. I also thought that, because this was meant to be the climax to the Peter Capaldi era. It was meant to be his forced regeneration, wasn't it? And to go down fighting the Cybermen was a good one, I thought. We've had Logopolis, we've had the Planet of the Spiders, and I thought, to go down fighting Mondasian Cybermen and with his sonic screwdriver, shouting out Voga and everything. I thought that, and they killed him. They didn't just shoot him once, did they? Like a Dalek would. They shot him 3 or 4 times while he was still speaking. They were brutal. So I equally found them horrifying because they didn't even give him a death sequence. They just
and we're back at this thing where, as I was saying earlier, the very fact that they did it with some of the cheaper costumes as well as some of the more expensive ones, but it shows that it doesn't have to be the money spent on it. It just has to have the imagination spent on it.
Just a little TLC, a little tender love and care, somebody that gives a flip about what they're doing and is motivated to make something good, and they can create magic with very little.
Mm-hmm.
And the wonderful thing about those costumes and how they appeared in World Enough in Time is that they made a virtue of the fact that they were cheap, because the whole soft cloth face of those regional Cybermen is because they're bandages, and there's a top knot, and this thing goes up. And I thought that was wonderfully thought through and absolutely made a virtue out of those relatively cheap costumes. And anybody watching that may well think, that's typical Doctor Who, it's a bit clunky and all the rest of it, but it absolutely is integral to the story because this has all been done on a sort of steampunk basis in the bowels of that ship. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful tale and a wonderful, wonderful costume, if not the best cyber costume ever.
So, Michelle, your favorite Cyberman story?
My favorite is Earthshock, and not just because Adric dies, but because actually there is a risk to it. There's a danger. There's not everyone comes out of this thing alive, and that's what I enjoy out of Earthshock.
And because you saw it, I remember talking to you about this. You saw it at a different time. We all got a shock live almost when it was shown.
Yeah.
But Michelle, you must have seen it later and known there was going to be a shock surprise Cybermen and shock Adric death type thing.
I did, yeah. But it's still a good story.
Same for me.
Excellent.
I mean,
because I just saw it for the first time last year when I did my watch through.
So that's an interesting one from the two Americans there, because you knew what was coming, so to speak, but you still think it stands the test of time.
It's called quality.
Yeah, when they come popping out of the containers. That's just scary.
Michelle, it's like the weirdest thing happens when they make something good and entertain us. It's like I don't care. I'm one of those people you can spoil it all for me.
You know, I don't care. There's a blooper that you can see David Banks as
right
talker because it slipped out of his mask. I don't care that you can see that. It's still good.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Hartnell-esque moment when Peter Davison argued. We all laugh about it, don't we? When Peter Davison's doctor argues with the cyber leader, and he talks about all the things humans like a well-prepared meal. Remember all that? And but you know, we had the moment, which was a bit like Hartnell, love, pride, you know, and that clip that you see in Earthshock. And there was also this bit. I mean, I've got an element of it here where basically the Fifth Doctor saying you don't need to leave the humans on board. Now it's become a bomb. And then the cyber leader says, no, I'm giving them a gift of enjoying this feeling, and this bit like Revenge of the Cybermen, where basically this will be an amazing, magnificent spectacle. And I'm giving you the moments to enjoy fear. Now, John, when we talked the other day, Earthshock was up there with you, wasn't it?
Yeah, both of the ones I would pick, which we debate with, have been mentioned already. World Enough in Time and Earthshock. I was going to choose along the lines of where Brandon's going, you know, mentioning stories, but not for reasons that the Cybermen are in it. So I'm going to pick The Brain of Morbius because they're not in it at all as my best cyber story. So there you go. but no, to be serious for a second, if I was to edge it at all, it would be Earthshock, and here's the reason for why. It had been 7 long years since the Cybermen had been in Doctor Who, so they came back, and they came back with huge impact. It really was a shock to see the Cybermen back. It was days before social media, days before leaks, and all this sort of stuff. Jonathan Turner had gone out of his way to make sure this was a big secret surprise. Episode 1, as I mentioned earlier, uses androids to keep their mystery all the longer, to give you that big, huge episode 1 cliffhanger. So it had impact. They came back with fancy new costumes to the extent that they remained with the same look mostly throughout the 1980s. Although they had emotion in their voices, they were very well acted after some pretty poor cyber leading in Revenge of the Cybermen, a bit of hands on hips and all that going on Revenge. But this time round, they were the full package, and they really did it. So they came back with huge impact. And what, if anything, that wasn't unfortunately maintained throughout the rest of the 80s, in that a bit of Doctor Who iconography, which was vital to the series and vital to the memories of people who had grown up watching it, was brought back, and it was brought back with impact and respect, and people loved it as a result of that. And Earthshock, whether it's because of the Cybermen, was because of the incidental music, Peter Graham's direction, or Adric's death at the very end, is still a show you can go back to now and watch and love, even though you know everything that's going to happen. And it's a story I'll probably visit annually, purely because it is absolutely the best of Doctor Who. Earthshock.
Earthshock. We've had World Enough in Time. We've had Earthshock. We've had 2 Earthshocks at least.
The Morbius, because they're not in that.
I will have that one. Jeremy, what was yours again?
Well, guess which one's my favourite?
Well, do you like the Revenge one, or the Tomb, or the? Because I know Cyberman attacking your neck has to be Liz Sladen, that one.
Well, a close second is Tomb of the Cybermen.
Right.
And it was the lost story, and everybody said it's a fantastic story, it's a great story. When it came back, and you think, oh, it's a bit hype. But when it came back and I watched it, I thought it's spot on, absolutely spot on. So I'd give it 9 out of 10. However, my all-time favourite are these guys behind me.
Shows again, Revenge
of the Cybermen, which is my favourite. Despite the fact that Christopher Robbie decided to put his hands on his hips because he got no pockets.
Okay, ladies, this is how we're going to do. We're going to be.
Well, you tell me, Jeremy,
that'd be American Cyberman.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't
He
one.
looked as though he was about to start
It was both hands on the hips.
That's an American woman. It's like, okay, you're mad. I'm gonna put my hands on the.
So you tell me first, Jeremy, why you like them, because I agree with you actually.
Well, I like the music. I like the fact that instead of actually using CSO, they actually went down to the caves at Wookiee Hole and filmed it. Can you imagine if it had been on, CSO? I like the design of the Cybermen, and they're more what I would call chunkier, more filled out, rather than the 80s Cybermen, which looked a little bit sort of, in those sort of baggy costumes. And so that's one reason why I preferred the Revenge of the Cybermen, and it's a good story as well.
I find it's the same with a lot of things actually. Is obviously that shocked me as a kid.
Yeah.
The realization of the Cybermats, actually seeing a brand new Cybermat. Oh, there they are. The Cybermat attack. The space plague. I've mentioned this in 2 shows in a row now. I'll do like a good space plague. And you that element, I liked the location filming and at Wookiee Hole. I liked the music. I liked it was a simple plot that, sometimes you can overcomplicate things. We can all talk about Attack of the Cybermen got bogged down in lore. Whereas this one was straightforward, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We have a new concept. The planets are gold. We're a bit irritated by it. We need to get rid of them. Blah, da, 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 da. And we'll make a cyber bomb out of it. I mean, copied later on by Earthshock to do the same plot again. We'll turn it make a cyber bomb from a ship. So I do like Earthshock because it was just my time of peak Doctor Who, but Revenge of the Cybermen was like the first time after reading the books to see them in action. And I know what you mean by the costume. That costume is more akin to the 60s, like Invasion, where they looked a bit more metallic and solid. Yeah. I didn't really, I mean, I do adore Earthshock, but I didn't really like that uniform because I knew what the gear was that they'd added bits onto. I know you can argue with the 60s at the ping pong balls and all the rest of it, and at the end. But this version I liked, and I like the fact that the gun was attached to their head, which takes you back to the 10th planet to a point. If you look at the World Enough and Time, the way the Peter Capaldi Doctor was shot. Yeah, I do like this one. It got me going. I know what you're saying about the hands on the hips and the plasticine planet.
And another thing about Wookiee Hole, it was a difficult film shoot, and a couple of the crew members claimed they actually saw a ghost while filming in Wookiee Hole.
Brendan,
it's an interesting place.
Those cyber costumes that you were talking about, Brendan, those are the sort of greatest hits of the Cybermen. In that, I think the body suits are real in space with bits added, and the helmets are definitely Invasion. So I think they went to the BBC costume store and really took what was remaining, what was left, what was usable to make those costumes. And I agree with you that they are excellent costumes. I particularly love the bodies as well. They look very sturdy, more so than the Earthshock ones do. But unfortunately, it's never going to be a winner for me as a story, this one. But all power to the two of you for enjoying it. I think it's certainly the music. Kerry Blythen's music is spot on.
Yeah. I like the design of the Cybermat as well.
Yes, that's true. Very good.
But this is the first time that I saw a Cyberman story, so I was quite impressed by it. I mean, the previous Cyberman stories were in the annuals and TV comic.
But Jeremy, you've got a Cybermat on your armrest there. Can you show us it? The Cybermat on,
I can show you.
But isn't that the 60s one?
Yeah. This is the Wheel in Space one, I think. Yeah, Wheel in Space. Yeah,
absolutely fantastic.
I get it confused with the one from Tomb of the Cybermen. It's a bit fragile now.
It's bigger than you'd imagine, isn't it?
Yeah.
It looks like the little silverfish that get in the papers that we in Museum World we hate because they eat the paper and we squish their little guts.
Yeah, it's a bit like a silverfish.
You squish them.
If you find them in bathrooms and damp places.
Yeah, they eat paper and archival stuff, so we like to squish their little guts.
So So while we're on it, I mean, you've introduced it, but while we're on it, can we forget the different iterations of the Cybermat? I mean, I know you said you liked the Revenge one, Jeremy.
Yeah.
You've got the whole range there, everybody, right up to Silver Nemesis and that. I mean, if you had to pick a Cybermat out, which one would it be?
Revenge of the Cybermen.
Yeah, I think so.
Ditto.
I think that.
Revenge, I would say.
Why is it?
Definitely Revenge.
I'm intrigued why nobody's saying the latest one that looks like a piranha fish.
No, it's a bit.
I don't like the
Revenge of the Cybermen reminded me of a armadillo. It was very much like that.
Yeah.
I think that was a good call.
I was pleasantly surprised to find out that this was like one cool thing about seeing New Who first and going back and seeing Classic. And Michelle, you'll probably be able to speak to this too. Is like when you see something that was actually created, that it came from Classic Who, that they didn't make that up in New Who, and that was one of the cool things for me, seeing that the Cybermats had come from the original series. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's so much to actually kind of go over with cyber stories, but I think they have been overused, which was our previous point from ages ago on this one. So have I gone around the panel? I'm just checking now, because we've had a bit of agreement on Earthshock. That's 2 on Earthshock, roughly. We had a World Enough and Time, and 2 of us said Revenge. So that should add up to 5. I think, has everyone done on that? Just checking. Hugh, did you? I'm trying to just...
I was World Enough in Time, so and Dr. Paul. So
I think I got the maths right. So yeah, that we're covered on that one. So right, so we've had the favourite story, we've had the LGBT gender debate on it, we've had the burning issue on it. Now, my next question really is regarding how far we can go off the iconic template. So I think we were just talking about. I mean, Jeremy earlier sent me this. So Jeremy, if you want to mention the Cybermen on skis while I just get the picture.
The jet thrusters, yes.
Yeah.
Men were portrayed in the TV comic in the 1960s, the Mondasian Cybermen, with jet skis, which were, I think, quite a good idea, you know, to try and capture the Doctor.
I'm as big a fan of the magazine comics as I am the show almost. Like I've gotten so many of them. I love the old magazine, and I love the magazine comics, like especially the old stuff.
Have you guys seen the fake blooper reel done when they brought them back, and they have the Cybermen running through the park going, "Wee, I'm a light little flower."
I haven't seen that.
Then they're on the swing sets being pushed. You know, they're like the Cyberman offshoot. I
mean, I know I'm always fascinated by this. You know, like you obviously like Big Finish, people like comic strip, and I seem to have, as a Doctor Who fan, have stuck really just to the program. So, who on the panel sticks to? Well, yeah, nice ideas. Didn't really read them, but I'd rather this didn't tarnish the real show. John.
Yeah, I don't do all that. We've had this conversation before. I don't do extended media. Never have done. I do buy the magazine, but I never read the comic strip. Good luck to those that do. I wish you well, but yeah, you know, Doctor Who's beauty, the beauty of Doctor Who is that it didn't have the money to do all those visuals, and you could go and have that in books and use your imagination and see it in comic strip form if you wanted to, or on by virtue of audio media as well. Do I want to see stuff like that in proper Doctor Who? Probably not, because it becomes more about spectacle than story then. And I think Doctor Who's biggest claim to fame has always been meaty stories, well made, well written, well acted mostly, and funny. And I think the more Doctor Who concentrates on that rather than spectacle, the better it is.
Okay, if I come back on that, you know, when we talked the other day, you said you like Dark Water and Death in Heaven, yeah, and I know why, and we agreed on a few bits, and the sequence, it's a brilliant climax actually with the skeletons and the water and the Cybermen. Yeah. But when we're talking about the kind of jet ski Cybermen there that look like, no, all right, let's stick to where we are. The Cybermen were flying in that story, weren't they?
Yeah, totally unnecessary. Didn't have to do it, you know. So that's just because I like something doesn't have to like 100%. There's things, you know. They had the Sea Devils doing the same thing in that abhorrence that was Legend of the Sea Devils. No need to do that. And again, it's laziness. The need for Cybermen A to get to place B. So what will have them do? We'll have them flying. And that will save me having to write a reason for that to happen. So yeah, all lazy. The thing about it is, if you want to watch any genre show with spectacle, I suggest don't watch Doctor Who, because Doctor Who's not about that. It's not about effects, or it shouldn't be, because the minute Doctor Who becomes more about the visuals than it does about the story, then stop making it, because that's not what Doctor Who is.
Now, how quick was everybody on the spending the pennies or spending the cents when
I did that during your video?
Yeah,
my penny.
when Tomb of the Cybermen came out,
right.
how fast were people at buying that, consuming it?
First day.
And did it deliver? Did it meet up to the book?
Yes.
Because that's the other thing me and John were talking about was the book with the wrong cover on, of course.
Yes.
The wrong Cyberman. But
yeah, it's a fantastic story, and I give it 10 out of 10. And it is definitely, Tomb of the Cybermen is definitely a classic, despite its faults in production.
Totally agree.
Which you sort of kind of overlook anyway, because you say, well, it's the money. But it's such a fast-paced story that it never lets up, and it's it's the 4 really fantastic episodes, and thank God they rescued it from Hong Kong and managed to get it back. Seriously.
So Tomb was one of the lost episodes?
Oh yeah, 4 episodes.
Yeah, it says lost for most of
Wow.
back in
Didn't know
92. Was it 92?
92,
Yeah.
Comes on that.
I bought it first day out, and it was fantastic, and it lived up to my expectations. A lot of people were disappointed on subsequent viewings. I still think it's a fantastic story, and the book itself was one of those sort of era-defining moments for me. I loved that book and returned to it constantly to read. It's just fabulous. Jerry Davis wrote really good Cybermen in the novelizations. He was better doing the novelizations, I think, than he was doing screenplays. But the video, the VHS, when it came out, didn't disappoint. And you know something else, to tie to present day Doctor Who, there's proper atmospheric ambient music in Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yeah, the thing they play for the Cybermen.
Sega Nakanola spent 3 years trying to do properly and couldn't.
That music as they're coming out of the tomb, that's classic. I mean,
Even while they're in the tomb, before we even get to see the Cybermen, there's that beautiful ambient noise going on in the background, which actually makes you feel cold. So that's good job, well done. And as I could have taught the last but one composer of Doctor Who a thing or two about ambient music.
So, on our discussion about which ones we liked and all the rest of it, and did you enjoy the Tomb of the Cybermen as much as you read it? Do you think we missed a trick in Doctor Who, New Who, when these were the designs that they said they were going to use for the Cybermen? I mean, would you have been happier if they'd gone down this road?
No.
It looks like Hellraiser. I mean, it's not Doctor Who.
I mean, I'm fascinated. I mean, the one on the right, on the far right there, is I know it looks a shriveled human head, I suppose, doesn't it? But I suppose that could be absolutely gruesome if that's a head. It's a bit Davros-ish, I suppose.
I doubt that would ever have been allowed. That may well have been an artist's first chance and something we'd like. I doubt very much that was ever in contention. Ever.
And the middle one just looks like an alien, not a robot.
The first one looks like a cyber sensorite.
Or a cyber Silurian,
Yeah.
Actually, the first one is like a cyber version of Omega,
the second Omega,
Yeah, and then I agree, the middle one is a bit like alien. It's that kind of alien quality to it. You can imagine the acidic teeth coming out. I'm fascinated by the one on the right, though. I mean, I know it's gruesome, and it probably wouldn't be allowed on Doctor Who at family time, but that's kind of what I sometimes wish for, a bit of darker,
Yeah. I think you can achieve that through direction. If you want darker, in terms of light and shadows and the angle of the camera, without having to resort to something like those 3 pictures. And it just requires a bit of clever direction. That's all.
They should have got
Well,
these events.
I mean, obviously the example you can pick on that is in Psycho, there is no stabbing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You never see the piercing of the knife ever.
No.
It's
So-
all in your the thoughts. Yeah.
So I take your point that you don't need to go dark in that way. The direction can do it for you, or the story writing can do it for you, and get the imagination going. So if I just do a roll call of around the panel, dead fast. So if we talk about Cyberman stories, you said your favourites, but what's the most key moment? Now we'll park the Bill Potts one because a few of us have said it. So I grant that the Bill Potts moment is quite gruesome and horrific. But any, maybe from childhood, etc., a moment, a scene. It could be just a fleeting scene from Doctor Who with the Cybermen. Is there one that kind of resonated with you?
Yeah.
Michelle?
The Brigadier being turned into a Cyberman.
When was that?
That was at the Death in Heaven.
Death in Heaven. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to go back. Gosh, there's a bit of
Yeah, he sees him in the cemetery, man. It
He's
was
in
a
the
really
cemetery
good
and
scene.
they salute him, yeah, because he's dead. And he's
Yeah, he
and
salutes him.
he saves Kate. He saves his daughter.
Right, got you. I'm gonna have to go back. That I've forgotten that bit. Right, okay, I get that. So chilling from there, Brandon. Where would you go? A chilling moment that resonates with you regarding Cybermen.
Definitely the one we mentioned a little bit earlier, but when they're basically factory, I think it was in the first David, so maybe second series with the first one with David Tennant, where they're going through kind of like the factory and they're converting them into Cybermen, and Rose's mom's in there trying to get away and everything. To me, that's like the first scene I think about, because it was one of those that tricks you and makes you a little tense because you're not quite sure who's going to make it out. And I thought that was good. And the horror elements that they had showing, like the kitschy CGI devices and all that, like that's the way to do it, especially when it's a family show. You can cut away before the blades ever hit. So, they did that right too.
I do agree that although I was a bit older, I could see how that got the imagination going with all the cutting machine and everything. Hugh, where would you go with what resonated with you?
I mean, I think that I'd probably be much the same. I think that whenever you see conversion like that, it's much more dramatic. So I again, so having slagged off New Who, I think there are a lot of good bits in New Who. I just think I think they've overused it and over-evolved it after that. And I'm not particularly keen on the Cybermen. I'm with John. I don't like the clumpy bits, but I think whenever you see that happening, it's quite scary, and that's probably as scary as we'd be allowed nowadays. So I'll go with that as well. I'll agree with Brandon.
Yeah,
'Cause
John.
I think that's the second time.
John, what resonated with you, either as a kid or whatever, or even children from the books? I don't know, a moment.
Strangely enough, I would have said what's just been said by Hugh and by Brandon, because I think that whole body horror stuff and getting the message across that these aren't robots. For all these stuff nowadays, they're not inside that. Although we're not sure what is left now. Is it the brain? Is there still parts of the body going on? We're not quite sure anymore. But nonetheless, there's a huge element of body horror, and I think New Who reintroduced that concept to what we're becoming increasingly in the classic Who, increasingly robotic versions of the Cybermen. Having said that, though, I'm going to go for Earthshock again, and the Cybermen were put back to where they belong, which is in dark corridors. And there's a fantastic, in fact, there's two scenes in Earthshock in particular, one where involving Tegan and one involving the Trooper, as they go into the TARDIS, where the Cybermen just appear out of nowhere and grab. And that's genuinely jump scare-ish. And it's not often you get a jump scare in Doctor Who, but that works. And the Cybermen are always at their best, just like those illustrations we've shown earlier on from the Moonbase novelization. They're always at their best when they're lurking in the shadows, an unknown presence ready to strike. Fabulous.
Jeremy?
Well, the classic moment I think that resonates with lots of fans, including myself, is when the Cybermen are coming out of the tombs, climbing down. And that particular one, but which is my favourite, but my all-time favourite actually is in Revenge of the Cybermen, when the Cybermen are in the caves and the Vogons start firing at them. And the Doctor says, I think someone's trying to attract your attention, walks off, and then the Cybermen start firing at the Vogons, and they end up falling like ninepins. And you've got the music in the background. And I think it's so impressive, that particular scene.
What's interesting about the Cybermen in those days is they walked slowly, and it wasn't. It wasn't that they were perturbed. We know what we're doing. We'll be methodical. We'll shoot you down. And
You'll get tired. We won't. Right.
Yeah. There's an element of that. I know what you mean. I'm torn between the shock of seeing the Cybermen actually just back at the end of episode 1, Earthshock, which really did give you the jump that John was talking about, but in a different way, where you really, really, really didn't. You were, whoa.
There's an interesting fact, which I didn't know about, that they were thinking of bringing back the Cybermen in Frontier in Space instead of the Ogrons.
Right. Yeah.
Daleks. I don't know how it was going to work, but they've obviously changed their mind on that one. But so John Pertwee would have been battling against the Cybermen if it had gone that way.
That's a shame, because he never got them, did he? So
he did later on in 5 Doctors. So
he did.